Make some noise.
The year is 1987, and Brooklyn's thrashing hardcore antagonizers, Carnivore, breaks up after the release of their second and final album, Retaliation. Everyone in Carnivore returns to their normal everyday jobs. Drummer Louis Beto will return to his job at the New York City Transit Authority, and vocalist and bassist Peter Steele would return to his job at the New York City Department of Parks and Recreation. Fast forward to August of 1988. Peter would be approached by drummer Sal Abrascato with the interest of starting a new band. By 1989, to round out the lineup, they would employ the talents of guitarist Kenny Hickey and keyboardist Josh Silver, who had played in Peter's first band Fallout, which Louis Beto was also in, and later hard rock band Original Sin. It was known that every band member knew each other before they were bandmates. Kenny and Sal knew Peter since they were teenagers, as they were fans of Carnivore. And to continue showing how small of a world it is, Louis was Sal's drum teacher. Peter's relationship with Josh is interesting, since prior to this band, they arguably knew each other the longest, being friends since at least 1972, and would later be in the aforementioned Fallout. This band would briefly go by the name of New Minority, but by 1990 they would go by Repulsion. It was during this time that they would create the logo, the O with the negative sign inside of it, in the iconic shade of green, Pantone 369.
Thing it's been going on for years.
This is pretty
trying to
close.
get the green right. It's
This is
Pantone 369.
Yeah. This right here, like when we first got together, Peter was still working for the Parks Department. And, you know, obviously the main color for the Parks Department was this color. It was like a puke green. He never wanted to detach himself from Brooklyn or the Parks Department. So he made this the official color of the band. When the band first started rehearsing, we were rehearsing on Quentin Road in Marine Park in Brooklyn. Sal's father owned the building, and we had this basement space. Oh, let's build a a room to rehearse in. We built out the room, and Peter's like, well, I want to put my 2 cents, I'll paint it. And he comes down with the cheapest Parks Department paint. It was like this horrible color, oil paint. Paints it. 1 year later, it still wasn't dry. You back up into the wall, and you got olive green paint all over him, and it's still to high heaven. So that kind of permeated throughout the band's, color. It was black and that horrible green. Yeah, Peter needed consistency. He needed continuity. Otherwise, he would strangle you.
Yeah.
The green's wrong.
Yeah.
And that carries over till today.
Yeah.
They would go to the Systems 2 recording studio in Brooklyn and record a demo. The demo costed $6,000, courtesy of Josh Silver's mother. Something that Josh was heavily retentive about.
So we went in there, and obviously we needed money. They charged money, and Josh went to his mom. He borrowed $6,000 from his mom to do the demo. And I just remember him driving me goddamn crazy, man. $6 a minute! Get it right! That's my mother's money! I'm like, oh my God.
The demo would be completed and released in 1990 as a cassette under the title None More Negative. The newly christened Repulsion would play several shows in the Brooklyn area, but they would later be forced to change their name following a notice from the Michigan grindcore band who had the rights to the name. In order to make the logo work, which the band had tattooed on themselves, Peter had to think of another name that would be a perfect fit for the band, so he went with the name Sub-Zero. Unfortunately, there was another band from New York called Sub-Zero who had the rights to the name, so it was back to the drawing board. But it was following a broadcast from the Red Cross that Peter found a name for the band.
So after getting this stupid thing tattooed on ourselves, it was up to me to think of a name to, compensate for the logo. So I don't normally listen to the radio, but there was a request for typo negative blood by the Red Cross. And so I was like, well, that's it, typo negative.
Oh, okay.
O negative, it matched the tattoo, and sounded like no one else could possibly have rights to it.
We're called typo negative now. Not Repulsion no more. This is like the name of the week.
Originally, the band wanted to shop the demo around to other labels, but since Peter was signed to then small label Road Racer Records, he couldn't. Side note, Road Racer Records was the American division of Dutch label Roadrunner Records in the 1980s. The name was changed to Road Racer in the late 80s to avoid copyright problems with Warner Brothers' Looney Tunes Roadrunner character having the same name as the label. Though this was resolved by the 90s when the Dutch parent company moved to the United States in New York, where they would go by Roadrunner Records from the early to mid 90s to the present. End side note. There would be cease and desists from Road Racer to other labels, forbidding Peter and company from signing to other labels, as he still had 5 more albums left in Roadrunner's 7-album deal, the standard minimum amount whenever a band signs to Roadrunner. Typo were also hoping to work on the material from the demo, but on June 11th, 1991, the label released it as their debut album, Slow, Deep, and Hard, a glorified demo released as a full-length. The only thing that is different from the None More Negative cassette is the rearranged track listing. In order to promote the band in Europe, the label also released a CD split in their Breaking Barrier series, which is a gem in itself given what Roadrunner wrote about Typo in its description on that CD. The newest addition to the ever-diversifying Road Racer roster is the deranged brainchild of Peter Steele, former Carnivore leader. After 2 vicious, hateful Roadrunner albums, Carnivore 1985 and Retaliation 1987, Carnivore disbanded in February 1988, leaving Peter to commence with an even more intense and more violent project. Teaming up with keyboardist Josh, guitarist Kenny, and drummer Sal, the 4 officially formed Typo Negative in August of 1988. The title of their forthcoming Road Racer debut, Slow, Deep, and Hard, not only suggests the band's musical approach, but also applies the harsh sexual overtones that lace the record. Peter picks up where Carnivore left off, taking the anguish and terror that was Carnivore to new and more dangerous extremes, engulfing the listener in a gloriously dark world of anger, destruction, pain, and fear. Elements of raw thrash, hardcore, grunge, and industrial music combined with haunting keyboards and gruesome sound effects to create a sound that one noted journalist described as the musical equivalent of rape. With Typo Negative, you will be penetrated slow, deep, and hard, and depending on your threshold of pain, you'll have no choice but to find yourself immersed in blissful agony, screaming for more.
Holy dog.
Oh, shit. That's okay. That was a little rough, a little harsh.
I mean, I think it was a little exaggerated, but, a lot of it fits.
In hindsight, did Roadrunner do a good job in selling you boys in that in that scathing assessment?
In that particular.
So those are people on our team.
Yeah. That was the creative brilliance of our of Team Roadrunner.
With
the music, I mean, what's wrong with that, man?
How many units would you like to buy?
I mean, I hope they're still not using the same lines for the new bands.
Here's some interesting pieces of trivia for you. The cover is a heavily grained out image of sexual penetration, presumably taken from a pornographic magazine, and the back cover photo was taken in Coney Island. According to Kenny, only the phone booths that him and Josh were in are still standing to this very day, with Sal and Peter's phone booths being removed. The headshots that you see in the CD booklet were reused from the Repulsion demo. In terms of sound, the thrash metal sound from Carnivore is present, as the album's material was made up of leftover Carnivore songs, along with future elements like slow doom metal riffs and atmospheric sounds and keyboards, which would be heard in later Typo albums, complemented by Peter's distinct bass tone of distortion, chorus, and delay. Something Peter wanted to do was combine elements of bands he was a fan of. It is a well-known fact that Peter loved Black Sabbath and the Beatles, but he also wanted to incorporate other elements into Typo Negative, like Laibach, Neubauten, Lycia, The Cure, To Agnostic Front, to Cro-Mags. According to Peter's bandmates, one of Peter's all-time favorite bands is Devo, as the satirical social commentary was a massive influence on him, combined with his typical dark sense of humor. And these are only a few examples in a long list of influences. Another future staple in Typo Negative songs were the sections, also known as cantos, specifically on later albums like Bloody Kisses and Dead Again, where the song shifts sound and goes into a different tempo and pace, but still feels natural in context to the song. As an example, look at the first song on the album, Unsuccessfully Coping with the Natural Beauty of Infidelity, which starts fast and thrashy in the first section, ambient and atmospheric in the second section, and up-tempo in the third section. Lyrically, Slow, Deep, and Hard is the most direct in the Typo catalog. Songs like Unsuccessfully Coping and Prelude to Agony were inspired by a bad breakup Peter went through where his girlfriend at the time cheated on him with another man. Though it was later reported by the time he recorded the song he had gotten over the breakup. Zero Tolerance and Der Untermensch are about Peter's political beliefs, but delivered in a carnivore-esque fashion. Specifically about people who refuse to get a job and live off of welfare.
I feel that the average person, normal people, work for a living. They don't, live off the government's back. They don't live off anybody's back. They have pride. They stand on their own 2 feet. If a person chooses not to work, that's fine. But don't go in and, collect benefits because you're too lazy to get up out of bed. I have to wake up for work at 4:30 a.m. in the morning, get my ass out of bed into the freezing cold because I have pride. And yet I pay taxes so some slob can sit in bed watching cartoons while I'm out cleaning a pot for them.
And it's told in a blunt, direct, and politically incorrect fashion. Gravitational Constant is a nihilistic song about losing all hope and ending it all. According to Kenny Hickey, the riff that plays before the last section was inspired by the old 60s sitcom The Munsters. It's dark, it's harsh, it's sad, it's angry, and it feels honest, even though it was meant to be a joke. It feels more like someone venting his frustration in a dark and humorous way if you are able to detect the humor. An example of this kind of sick, dark humor is the canto and Prelude to Agony, where Peter dubs to the jackhammer ape, with the sounds of screams and a jackhammer ensue. It's very absurd. In terms of a touring cycle, there wasn't all that much, as Typo was not a full-time band at the time. They were only able to tour as Peter would get a bunch of vacation time from his job at the Parks Department. It is known that Typo Negative would open for bands like Gwar, Stigmata, Prong, Overkill, Biohazard, Cro-Mags, Life of Agony, among others. A Typo show that we do have more details on was with Scottish hardcore band The Exploited when they toured the US, which, fun fact, future drummer Johnny Kelly drove the van and was their drum tech at the time. There was mass disruption during the whole tour because of The Exploited's antics, and when trying to play in Canada, they would try to find a hotel on Canada Day, which was nearly impossible. This led to a fed-up Peter either taking a plane to touring locations or leaving the tour and going home while bandmates drove with the other band. In Europe, the only known band they toured with was with Austrian death metal band Pungent Stench. It's because of this tour that led to a controversy that led to the more notorious misconceptions with the band. There are two components that led to this controversy. The first was the lyrical content in the song Der Untermensch, and by extension the whole album. And the second were sarcastic comments by Peter Steele himself. Go figure. According to Kenny Hickey, Peter once said to a German interviewer a modified version of the infamous John Lennon "Beatles are bigger than Jesus Christ" quote, where he said, in typical lovable Peter Steele fashion that would never be disrespectful to anyone, "Typo are bigger than Adolf Hitler." This led to the misconception of Typo Negative, and specifically Peter Steele, being a misogynist, a racist, a Nazi, a communist, etc. As a result, this led to cancelled shows all over Europe. Only 3 shows were played, including getting banned from certain countries from playing, protests, and bomb threats sent to venues. Due to this controversy, it did lead to Peter getting fed up and flying home while the rest of the band stayed. There is footage from that era where there's an interview with one of the Holland protesters and Peter himself. You can see the delusion coming from this protester. It's ridiculous.
En dan heeft hij misschien niet expliciet zichzelf als racistisch gemanifesteerd. Maar dan vind ik dat hij zich wel heel duidelijk van een seksistische kant en van een anti-werkeloze kant laat zien.
Maar dat is toch nog geen reden om iemand zijn concert te verbieden?
Voor mij wel.
Looking back at everything in retrospect, band members would say the humor of Slow, Deep and Hard doesn't translate well in non-English speaking countries, as they take the lyrics literally. As to debunk some of these accusations, which are verifiably false, starting with the Nazi accusation. It's false, as Josh Silver, Peter's longest friend and bandmate, who he's known since the early 70s, is Jewish, and has never been reported to making any anti-Semitic remarks, even from his bandmates. To debunk the communism accusation, as well as to continue debunking the Nazi accusation, Peter was a very provocative individual who loved to piss off both left and right-wing people. This is not an assumption, as he has admitted this.
When I was in Carnivore, I had intentionally written songs like Jesus Hitler, God is Dead. I mean, I attacked left-wing people, right-wing people.
The misogyny accusation has also been heavily debunked, as Peter was a mama's boy and had 5 older sisters. And it's safe to assume that it would shape a young boy with how to treat a woman. In some sense, you could say Peter had 6 mothers growing up. The songs on Slow, Deep and Hard were done as a form of venting, and from various interviews that would later resurface with Peter himself, and more recent ones from his former bandmates, have all said Peter was very respectful to women, and that all the anger in those songs were directed at a singular woman. Not all women.
What would you say to those people that maybe are taking those things that way?
That was referring to one woman that you were angry with her. What do you do when when you're betrayed by a woman, you use language like that. Everyone does.
Right.
You know, when you're angry. So it was just being real. He wasn't generally being, sexist. He wasn't being sexist at all. He was just expressing an inner emotion of frustration and anger at one woman, not all women. As far as that goes, that whole theory, the women were the center of Peter's life. He had 6 sisters, and a mother. Don't forget. All of them older than him. So basically he had 7 mothers. So, Peter loved women. I don't believe that any of the typo lyrics were sexist.
What do you think is the biggest misconception about Peter?
I think a lot of people, a lot of the conceptions the general public has of him is that he's this big, huge, tough guy, full of muscle, and he's mean and all that stuff. And he's quite the opposite. He was a hypersensitive, ultra-sensitive human being. Very complicated, ultra-sensitive human being. He was very shy, extremely shy. I mean, you would know that if you're a typo fan because you read the lyrics and you saw the interviews, But the people in the general public don't delve into all that. They see just the outer image,
As a result of this disastrous tour, Typo Negative would retell the events of the tour in the form of their follow-up, The Origin of the Feces, a fake live album.
They say we suck. We paid $15, 15 American dollars to get in here, and we're getting paid. Paid for the shit. Who's the real asshole here?
Along with wanting to work on the slow, deep, and hard material, it was Peter's idea to retell the story of what happened to them, and make a joke at the absurd idea of having a live album after just one LP. From the crowd reactions insulting the band, to the cover of Peter Steele's anus for the cover, which for obvious reasons isn't being shown on screen, hence the alternate cover, to having the exhumed corpse of P.T. Barnum as their producer, this album is one big joke. Along with retooled versions of Slow, Deep, and Hard songs, there's also a cover of Hey Joe, a song by Billy Roberts or Dino Valenti, and popularized by Jimi Hendrix, called Hey Pete, with changed lyrics, and a song that was cut from the original album called Are You Afraid? Something that would be sort of a concert staple that's first heard on Origin is the crowd chanting, "You suck." Something that fans would jokingly chant to the band later in their career.
You fucking cocksuckers. Don't you gotta work at school tomorrow? Don't you gotta suck the fucking dough besides being here? Go home. Go the fuck home. You come here for free toilet paper? You know what? You know what? We're gonna be here fucking next Halloween, so fuck you!
A rough start for this band, but by the next year, they would hit it big.